Welcome to Movies Are Life. I'm your host, Nathan Chandler. And grab your leg warmers and dust off your VHS player because we are traveling back to the 80s to talk about the number 9 film on the best rom-coms list and one of my favorites, The Wedding Singer. I'm going to bring in a first-time guest, Sean Crowell, to talk about this film. This movie has an incredible soundtrack, and Sean is a big fan of music, so it'll be fun to get his opinion on that. But it's also kind of ironic that we're talking about a film that revolves around weddings because I actually officiated Sean's wedding, which we talk about for a little bit. So before I bring Sean in, I have Whitney here because it's been a while since she's popped in. How are you doing, Whitney?
Great, doing great.
Yeah, you know Sean and his wife Michelle.
Yep.
Yeah, how'd I look up there? Yeah, getting them married, getting them hitched.
You looked great. Now, I should say they looked better.
Well, of course.
It was their wedding day.
I think maybe that's why they picked me, so everybody would be for sure to concentrate on them.
Yeah, that's definitely it.
Yeah, we just kind of met them through some mutual friends here in Oklahoma, and we don't see them all the time, but just really, really good folks that have wonderful girls. So anyway, I'm bringing Whitney in because people stop me on the street and they ask, what does Whitney think about season 6 of Love is Blind?
Well, I figured you're going to say that people stop you on the street and say that Whitney is your most favorite guest, of course. Right?
Well, that's the second. They've been missing you. That's why I had to bring you in.
Because I'm a delight.
Yeah.
They do ask about what I think about season 6 of Love is Blind. I'm perplexed by this Love is Blind. I don't know if it's me and my ability to relate to it, or if it is maybe not going as in depth as it has with other seasons, but I feel like I don't care about the people, and I don't know if it's because they've like kept them all just pretty even kill, or because why, but I feel like early on, I was just really connected to the characters and found their side stories interesting and found their family lives interesting. And like, none of these seem that far off base, or I don't know. Or maybe I'm just too swamped right now, and so I can't like really dive in. But something about it is hard for me this time.
Yeah, this is kind of a spoiler alert, but I feel like if people are watching it, they've probably watched it at this point. We've watched the ceremonies. The reunion hasn't come out yet, but I won't say who. But there's 2 couples who make it to the altar. I want to say there's probably like 5 that came out of the pods together.
Yeah. And
I was thinking about that, and I think partially it's almost like when The Bachelor, like when someone decided like, I don't want to, there's 2 girls. I don't want to bring the one all the way to the seashore and get down on one knee, and they just dismissed her earlier, which I think is very nice and very thoughtful. Yeah. But that kind of broke the seal a little bit. And so you see that the same thing, like the cliche of like somebody who comes back who was like didn't get a rose, right, whatever like that. I think very similar in this show. I forget what season, but when a couple had made it pretty far, even met families, and then they had like basically, they decided we're not going to even get to the point of going to the ceremony. That naturally plants the seeds in couples' heads. So I think the show definitely kind of loses steam because in this season there's some couples that get to that point. Yeah.
Now I could go on and on about different parts of them. I mean, I really liked like AD all day.
Yeah, all day.
All day. I liked Clay. Clay ended up being a surprise to me. Like, and maybe by the reunion I won't like him, but like I really liked him. There's just lots of like Jimmy. Is it Jimmy and Chelsea?
Jimmy and Chelsea.
I mean, Chelsea's the most annoying human being on the planet. Jimmy, I think, tried to be nice, but he's just like, blah. But, I mean, the whole concept is fascinating to me of them in the pods. And I like, how do they talk enough to, like, really know if they're, like, compatible? Like, you don't know if they smell or if they're, like... There's just a variety of things that you could be turned off on. Yeah. And I just can't... Like, I can get over the looks thing. I understand that, but I still think there's other stuff. Like, you have to think they're, like, cute, or you have to... I mean, you have to, like, find them appealing to be around.
Right.
And if they come out and you're not appealing to them, it's just, like, fascinating to me.
Yeah, I know it's the concept of the show, but you do think that it's on a rush timeline, needless to say. But I do feel like maybe some of the couples would actually end up like they would succeed if there was a little bit more time
Yeah.
to let those breathe. But I mean, it's what is it, like 4 to 6 weeks? Like
Yeah,
it's just regardless of who you are, regardless of the TV show, that's a pretty fast timeline.
And I can see like there is more success rate with Love is Blind, but I think it's because they have like the romantic getaway, plus they have where you just live in your normal habitat and meet your friends and family. And I do think there's times when they don't have the camera, they get some like living together time.
Right.
But I still don't think anybody's really should be getting married after 4 weeks, but that's just me. So of course we weren't dating that long, so what am I to say?
Well, no, but it was longer than a couple
I mean, we
weeks.
met in a pod. We did the same thing.
We did. We did.
Hey, whatever. We talked online first.
Yeah.
Over emails, and then so it was
Yeah.
weird. When by the time we met, I felt like I knew everything about you. So I get it.
Yeah, we still had photos, but to go off of though of each
That's
other.
true.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, is it still a show that you enjoy watching? You think you'll keep watching? Do you tell people to watch it?
Yeah, I mean, I want to know what everybody else thinks, and I want to listen to my podcast about it. And
Yeah.
So I'll keep watching it. But I did just find it kind of just, I don't know. I just was like, now I haven't. Once I see the reunion, I might be all back in. Who knows?
Yeah.
It just felt like they didn't dive deep into them.
Yeah.
Or it was shorter or something.
Yeah.
And I might have made that up. But
Yeah.
it just felt that way.
Yeah. Well, okay, so the movie today, we're covering The Wedding Singer. You didn't completely watch this with me, but I know this is a movie you've definitely watched a lot before, right?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah,
Sure.
It's a big thumbs up from you.
Love it.
Yeah. I think maybe I was connected to it a little bit, but maybe it's not a good connection because the wedding date that they set is my birthday, August 5th. Yeah, but then that's not really great because Julia Gulia and Glenn are not the best match, but always thought that was interesting. But yeah, it's number 9 on this list. Do you think that's
Number 9?
Number 9? Yeah.
Well, that's insanity.
Well, a little teaser. I think it very much deserves that mantle.
Well, I mean, I know once you like a movie, you're in, but I love The Wedding Singer, but to give it a 9 is pretty shocking.
Well, if you think about all the elements that make a great rom-com, it hits on all of them, in my opinion.
Has Drew Barrymore, has Adam Sandler.
Yeah.
What more could you love? I mean, I don't have any complaints. I laugh. It's got an old woman that dances. I'm in.
And raps.
I mean, once you have that, you get bonus points.
Yeah.
But I love the chase scene. If I could give a chase scene a 5, I know I wasn't invited to, but I would give that a 5.
Yeah.
A song. I'm in.
You're in. A group of people rallying behind love.
Heck yeah.
Yeah. Let's pop in that cassette tape and join us as we explore The Wedding Singer's timeless appeal, memorable characters, and the significance of its place in the Rom-Com Hall of Fame, which is really high in my opinion.
You're the wedding singer.
How you doing? I'm Robbie.
I'm Julia.
In a story about finding love where you least expect it.
Uh-oh. What? You like her? No, I don't.
This is my fiance, Glenn.
I don't even know your last name.
It's Gulia.
Julia's last name is gonna be Gulia. Julia Gulia. That's funny.
Why is that funny?
I don't know.
All right. Well, I'm welcoming in Sean Crowell. How are you doing, Sean?
Oh, living the dream, Nathan. Living the dream.
as always. So
as always, yes.
Yeah, I really appreciate you doing this. And I would say, just right off the bat, I mean, we were texting about this, and I mean, I self-admittedly that this has always been a favorite of mine, and you said the same, and so this one. I mean, I always try to do movies that I know that I'll enjoy talking about, but this one was kind of an easy one for me. I don't know about you.
Absolutely. I've watched this movie many, many more times than any other movie in my catalog. So this episode might be a bit of a gusher on behalf of the wedding singer. So
I was kind of telling Whitney when we were watching this. She didn't watch it fully with me, but some of it. But I was like, yeah, I've got to be careful not to get into like the Chris Farley show territory of like, you remember this and you remember that, because
yes,
yeah.
that can easily happen, especially with a movie that's so quotable, and all of the all of the scenes are memorable for various reasons. So lots of sight gags and jokes and things at every step of the movie.
Yeah. So I'll set up the movie just in case people aren't familiar with it. It's possible. Like my daughter Hallie's probably seen a lot of Adam Sandler stuff, but it's like, his like recent work. He's been around a long time. So The Wedding Singer was originally released in 1998 and directed by Frank Karachi, I want to say. But The Wedding Singer stars Adam Sandler as Robbie Hart, a talented wedding singer whose life takes an unexpected turn when his own wedding plans go awry. Alongside him is the charming Drew Barrymore as Julia Sullivan, a waitress with dreams of finding true love. The film was released on February 13th, 1998. It was produced on a budget of $18 million and had grossed $123 million worldwide and received generally positive reviews from its critics. It's often ranked as one of Sandler's best comedies. The film marks the first collaboration between Sandler and Barrymore. They appeared together in 50 First Dates and Blended. The film was later adapted into a stage musical of the same name, debuting on Broadway in April 2006 and closing on New Year's Eve of that same year. Did you know that about the Broadway show?
I didn't actually know that, but I think it's a perfect movie to turn into a Broadway show. There's so much music in the movie itself, both performed by the actors and also just the soundtrack.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I knew like it came out, but it kind of came and went despite being nominated for a couple of Tony Awards, including like Best Musical. And it was kind of on my radar a little bit. And I don't know if you know of this stand-up comedian. Do you know who Stephen Lynch is?
Yes.
Yeah, so
yes.
he played the lead of Robbie Hart, and he was like nominated as like best actor, and so that was kind of why I wanted to see it as well. It was to see
That's
him
fantastic.
in the performance. So, Stephen Lynch is one of those like, I think sometimes people are a little surprised by the dark humor that I have, and that's one of the examples I could point to. So
I was gonna point out that he's a bit gritty for what I would have expected you to really love, but I'm a big fan of the grim and the dark sarcastic humor as well. So
no, Stephen Lynch is like the maybe the like dark child of myself. I don't know.
That's really funny. So I'll have to go and listen to him again. I haven't listened to him in a really long time.
Yeah. So anyway, as far as this movie goes, so do you remember like when you first saw it or when it appeared on your radar?
Yes. So I was in college in Chickasha, which is sort of where I met our common friends. And we were hanging out together in a big group, and we watched movies regularly. And so when The Wedding Singer came out, and I didn't see it in the theater, but a friend of mine had the VHS tape. And so we watched the VHS tape over and over and over again, which was a common thing that we did with movies that we liked, because it was sort of a Mystery Science Theater-esque situation where we would, get really excited about the punchlines, and we would, all laugh together. I think that was a big part of me enjoying the movie so much, was that group dynamic. Yeah.
It's funny that you say that. So when I was like seeking out this movie, which by the way, I couldn't believe is just not traditionally streaming anywhere right now. And I could have swore I owned it, but I didn't have it in my collection. And so I was telling this to my coworker, and they're like, "Oh, I have a copy of it." Oh, I was like, "Oh, great." And they texted me later that night. The picture was of the VHS copy, and she was like, "So I'm assuming you can't use this copy." I was like, "No, I'm sorry, I can't."
You don't keep a VCR in a closet somewhere for the just in case?
Well, this might not surprise a lot of people. I actually do have a VHS player, but I've used it to help convert like old home videos for friends and family and stuff. So I do have one like stored up in the closet, but no, it's not just up and connected to my television.
So. We also have one shoved away somewhere to watch random VHS tapes, but we haven't pulled it out in a very long time. So
Yeah. Well, yeah, like you, I don't know if this is a movie that I saw in the theater necessarily, but Happy Gilmore, Billy Madison, I mean, these were movies that me and my buddies just watched on repeat all the time. And so maybe this one being a romantic comedy, I didn't like go out right away, but I mean, I definitely remember it just always kind of being in the rotation. And I mean, we had joked about that. Like, this was one I didn't necessarily feel like I had to watch again, but I mean, I'm glad I did just because I enjoyed the experience.
that's right. I agree. I actually was thinking about this earlier this week, and I'm surely not the first person to think of this, but I feel like in some sense, like the boys of our generation are sort of like the Adam Sandler generation. Like he shaped the sense of humor of a whole group of people, and that you see that flow through into the humor now. You know, there's this sort of slapsticky, a bit of sometimes off-putting, offensive humor that is celebrated amongst guys. He sort of started that genre to some extent, I think.
Yeah, and so that's a good kind of segue into what I was kind of going to ask you is like Adam Sandler as a whole. I mean, he's been around for a really long time now, and I would say he's kind of ebbed and flow a little bit with his career and stuff like that. Like, have you always been a big fan of his?
Not particularly, but when he is in a movie, I will generally see it.
Yeah.
And so he really took that foray into dramatic acting for a little while.
Yeah.
And I frankly, I enjoyed those movies on a deeper level, maybe than some of these earlier comedies, like Spanglish and the Punch Drunk Love.
Yeah.
Some of those, mid-career films, much more so than the sort of stuff that he's been doing lately, which is more daddy daycare type of films, right? Which is like older guys, kind of similar humor maybe to his young career, but it's less attractive coming from 50-year-old men. Young guys.
Well, kind of talk on that for just a little bit is, I probably kind of had a kind of a strange relationship to like how I've appreciated him, because definitely like early on, like these movies, Wedding Singer, Billy Madison, and all that, like, and then there was a time, and I always liked the dramatic stuff too, but then there was movies, just as far as comedies go, the quality of movies started to like taper off a lot. And his whole shtick, I think, with the silly voices, and I would even say as a musician, it was kind of like these songs are like, I mean, I know you enjoy music a lot. I'm not talented in that way at all, but it was enough to be like, I'm like, this definitely these songs sound like, you and your buddy in your like dorm room,
right,
just making up songs and stuff. And so, but then I honestly, I think I came back around to him, especially in this current, it's almost like, I think I like him being older, and like, I appreciate, as like silly as a movie is like, Just Go With It, or Blended even, or those type of things. Like, you could tell he purposely films these movies in like exotic locations so he can bring his family like to the set. Like, that's what he said. That
never occurred to me. That's interesting.
Yeah. He's like, no, it's great because I go do these movies and then my family can come with me and I don't have to worry about them. Like they're having a good time, I'm working, and that sort of thing. And so that's pretty cool. And then also, I mean, his casualness as well is to be admired. But yeah, I think right now, actually, he's had a Netflix deal, and he kind of jumps in and out of, comedy movies and serious movies. And so like recently, I know, like right now, I haven't been able to check it out, but he has like a space drama out right now on Netflix called Spaceman that just came out.
Okay.
And then he's had like the murder mystery movies that are, they're decent. So he almost is like doing these like one for you, but then he does something like Uncut Gems, which he was like terrific in. And I felt like he was kind of snubbed of a Oscar nomination there. And then, and I was a big fan of Hustle, which we actually covered on this podcast, where he plays an NBA scout. And that's more of a traditional kind of like sports movie type of thing. But like, I don't know, he's hit or miss, but I don't know. I did come around to him as far as like, okay, yeah, you're just Oh no, I think he has been true to himself more than anything. Oh, also, sorry, I'm just talking on about this, but we just watched recently over the holidays. He did an animated movie on Netflix called Leo about a pet lizard, like in a classroom.
Right.
Yeah,
Yes. I saw that. Yes.
yeah, by no means like the greatest animation movie ever, but it's got this kind of dark sense of humor in some parts that we as parents really appreciated, So, I mean, I think I almost appreciate him now more because he's just trying a bunch of stuff and he has the clout to do it, So, yeah.
Yeah, I think I'm not an expert on this topic, but I think a big part of his success comes from the production stuff behind the scenes.
Yeah.
And he does a lot of comedic writing and other types of writing, even for movies that he's not in. So he will produce a lot of stuff, and he's built, I think, wealth on the backs of that. And so he has a lot of freedom to do whatever he wants, basically, at this point. I think he's probably a pretty rich guy just from all the films that he's done. So that's a nice place to be.
I'm sure.
Somebody pointed out there's a picture of him and Rob Schneider and Kevin James. I can't remember who the fourth guy is in the group, but the person that you can measure the success of the person there based on their outfit. And so like Rob Schneider's like in a tuxedo, and as you go up the line, they get a little more dressed down. And then Adam Sandler's in like athletic shorts and a t-shirt and a ball cap and like flip-flops, standing on the stage at the Oscars, it says a lot about him too, that he doesn't take himself too seriously, which I love personally.
Well, talking a little bit about this movie, I think it works in a lot of ways, and we'll go into the rom-com rankings of it later. But I mean, it is a pure rom-com. But I was talking to somebody about this movie, and they used the word precious, and I thought that was a really good way to describe this movie. I don't know how you feel about that.
So precious, I'm interested. I would have used other words, but I actually used the word pure.
Okay.
When I was talking about this yesterday, because the main characters, the reason that it works is because they are, such pure characters that have such good hearts and tell the truth. And, they make a big deal about all of that as the movie goes on, how honest and genuine they are. So that's a big thing that stands out to me.
Yeah, for sure. Because I mean, this movie is and it's not trying to not be tropey. I don't know if that's a word really, but it's not trying to necessarily, change the world or anything. But I think you really hit on something good about the character aspect of it. And this was kind of doing some research about it. I don't have up here who was credited for the screenplay for this movie, but Carrie Fisher, the actress, and Judd Apatow and Adam Sandler himself, they worked as uncredited writers on this script, kind of script doctors. And I think you can really feel that, especially with someone like Apatow. And I think Carrie Fisher, if you've ever read her memoirs and stuff like that, really nail the character aspect of things. And I think that's what really is, like you mentioned, really shines through in this movie.
That's a really interesting thing to hear. I definitely see the Judd Apatow aspect of it in the character development and the sort of way people behave, some of their physicality. I didn't know about Carrie Fisher, and I haven't read her stuff, but now I'm intrigued. I want to go back and read some of that material as well.
Yeah, I've listened to a couple of her memoirs on audiobook, just because, especially with memoirs, and if it's the author who's reading it, it really comes through, like the voice that they're getting at. And I mean, her stuff is very, very raw and in your face. But no, they're definitely really good. And so I would say too that I obviously knew who Drew Barrymore was when this movie came out, but probably especially growing up on E.T., you always was that was always just talked about, that Drew Barrymore, starring, was one of the child actors, and then I was always kind of aware of her, probably her dark side, before leading up to this movie. I say that in quotes, but like she did the Letterman appearance and she was just kind of like had a wild side. But then this is really like when I think she started turn. I think this might have been about the same year that Scream came out. And so she kind of maybe relaunched her like acting career a little bit. But anyway, I think she's just adorable in this movie. I don't know how you feel about that, about her performance.
Right, almost to the point of being childlike, I would say. There's a lot of things about her, like naivete and trusting nature, that are a bit, sometimes to the point of saying, like, really, would a real person, believe that this Glenn guy is a good guy? Like,
Right. Yeah.
But yes, I agree, and I wondered if this was an image makeover for her at the time that she was doing this movie. Interestingly, I didn't know her from E.T. because I watched that as such a small kid, but I knew her from this made-for-TV movie called Firestarter, where she had the ability to start fires with her mind, and that was my first like early memory of Drew Barrymore was that like made-for-TV film, which I loved personally. The idea of kids like really taking it to the adults, with their minds. I thought that was pretty cool.
in your wheelhouse.
Yeah.
So obviously this movie really touches on the 80s vibes of everything. And so I feel like you might be a hair older than me. What year were you born?
81.
Oh, well, no, we're the exact same age. Okay. So I would say this movie is like, I mean, we were probably too young to really be like, especially, embedded into the fashion and, all the things that they talk about here. But I do think the 80s, setting is definitely stands out and is fun. I mean, do you like that about this movie?
It's really great, and I actually remembered despising the 80s because I was, not old enough, and so when I got into the 90s, that's when everybody was so cool because I was at that age. And so you always look down on whatever came just before, right? So the 80s stuff was so overproduced and, so electronic and all, and people were large, colorful, big personalities. And it felt like the early 90s, mid 90s musicians were very real, is grungy, right? So very different and very strong reaction. But as I watched this movie, and this is in the early 2000s when I watched this movie, it kind of made me fall in love with the 80s a little bit. Like it filled in a lot of my understanding of the 80s and made it really fun in a way that I didn't know it to be, which was surprising, at the time. And I actually went out and bought a greatest hits of the 80s CD after I watched this movie and listened to it on repeat. 19, 20 years old. So
we'll hit on the soundtrack of this movie later, but I probably have a very like similar story of just, I have always loved 80s music, but like, no, not necessarily right away. So part of it I think is nostalgic to maybe like music that my parents were playing. Like I always associate it with like Saturdays and like when maybe we were cleaning the house or just doing, just things around, yard work. And that just always like my dad playing that type of music. So I think I had that connection there, but I think you're right. Like, especially maybe near that high school and certainly into college, I really started just really digging 80s music for whatever reason. And I wouldn't be surprised if this movie had a little bit to do with that. But
I definitely, we were talking about it after we watched the movie last night, and somebody made the point that this is the earliest 1980s sort of throwback that they could remember, that they couldn't remember any movie before that really honed in on the culture of the 80s and kind of celebrated it in this way. So I mean, I don't know that's a fact, but it's the first one I know of for sure.
Yeah. In a weird way, it could almost, even though it's not, I know that there's probably like, sociology type of books and history books that, really talk about the decade better, But like, if I were like to show my kids of like, hey, this is kind of the vibe of what the decade was like, this movie is actually not too bad of an example.
Yeah, I mean, there are some things that are, is that common? Is that not common? Like Patricia Arquette's character, the Boy George sort of thing. Like, how common was that subculture? There's questions to be asked about that. And it's very front and center in the film, right? But but no, I agree. It's a bit exaggerated, but not too much.
Yeah. So that said, I don't know if it's because I've seen this movie so much and maybe kind of watching it with a little more of a analytical eye this time, but like I kind of wondered a little bit. I was like, is this a little like too? I mean, the jokes. There's so many references to 80s stuff that don't really contribute to the story.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Like when Glenn comes in with a CD player, I mean, it's a nice little kind of like, what's a CD? But like that in no way provides the narrative, even though like Robbie's friend in here played Sammy, who has the Michael Jackson jacket. That kind of plays into his character because he's just this guy who's trying to get chicks and just do whatever is cool. So those things kind of work for me. But at some point I was just kind of like, yeah, this is pretty heavy handed of kind of like, you remember when the show was real popular on VH1, like I love the 90s or I love the 80s. And it was almost similar like that. Like, do you remember this? And just like, it kind of a little bit too much winking at some points, but it's still like, it's also kind of what makes a movie fun. So I don't, if I said that, I know Whitney would be like, okay, come on, you're taking this way too seriously.
I mean, I absolutely loved it. And I was viewing it from the point of view of somebody who obviously loves this movie and loves all the 80s references. So if you're looking at it as from like a filmography point of view, I can see what you mean about it being just slipping in as many 80s references as they can to give the crowd a nice warm and fuzzy feeling. But I liked it. And with regard to that specific scene with the CD player, I actually think it served the point of showing that yet again, Glenn was a very unpleasant guy, and particularly unpleasant to Julia. And, the fact that she didn't know what a CD was, instead of saying, this is what a CD is. And I thought it really hammered home that point that he had like no respect for her at all.
It's true. Yeah.
Yeah. So that's yet another part of the movie where like, man, if somebody talked to me that way, I don't know that I would want to be married to them. Yeah. That's
Yeah, for sure. Okay. I'm glad you have mentioned Glenn, because Glenn, I think the character is what really works in this movie, because I don't know about you, and usually like with comedies, like there's always like over the topness, but to me, Glenn, I have personally have run into a Glenn many times in my life. I don't know if you could relate to that at all.
Absolutely. And he's a really solid throwback to a lot of these characters in 80s movies who are like Wall Street guys, so, but yes, I have run into people who think that they are really nailing life, but are pretty morally bankrupt individuals. So yes, I absolutely agree. And not to talk too much about the modern world, but there are a lot of these kinds of folks who are like currently, Twitter stars and YouTube stars and social media stars as well, right? So I think Glenn is still hanging around with us after all these years, despite the fact that he is the obvious villain of this film. I mean, anybody watching the movie would say, oh, he's also kind of a buffoon in another way as well. So yes, I mean, Robbie easily tricks him into admitting that he's having affairs. It's not even even he puts forth no effort to hide it.
Right.
So
Certainly like two moments. One is just when he's talking to Drew Barrymore's character, Julia, and when he's like basically getting out of the wedding stuff, like, oh, I just know you like that stuff, and I'd mess that up. Just, I mean, that little thing there is just like, I very much know guys who just like take the easy way out of being responsible for such things. So that moment, but also I do love the moment, the club scene, you know, where Julia goes to the bathroom and her friend goes with her, and they're just sitting there and have absolutely nothing to say at all. I'm like, oh, I have so been in that situation so many times where I could not be further different than the other guy sitting across from me.
So the first scene that you mentioned, I was watching this last night, and not only does he do that, he's kind of doing that in a sweet, like, aren't I cute way, but then his friend like puts the exclamation point on it and says he's going to be too drunk to even remember, and he does not say whoa, he high fives him. He says, you know it, you know.
Yeah.
So it's almost, when I say buffoon, like, that's what I mean. Like, he doesn't even have any like self preservation instincts. But the scene, I really identified with Robbie trying to make a joke, Adam Sandler trying to make a joke with him at the table about Julia sounding funny, and he said, why is that funny? I mean, so many times I've been in an awkward situation and try to, you know, have some humor going on, and it just doesn't. It falls super flat.
Touching on Glenn, I mean, and you mentioned George, but I think the slew of supporting characters here are so memorable. I mean, even the ones that have a lot of lines, but the ones that maybe don't have as many lines, such as, I just absolutely love John Lovitz in this movie. That's one of my favorites. I mean, talk about somebody who just comes in and just commands the screen for just a little bit, and then, you know, I mean, how much is he in the movie? Not even like a minute, maybe two. And you know, to me, has one of the most memorable scenes ever.
Hey, Jimmy, that was really good, man. Thank you.
Hey, no, thank you.
For what?
For quitting.
Or should I thank Linda? My business has tripled.
Well, you've just inspired me to hire a DJ. So thank you.
Oh, well, good luck finding a DJ who can move and shake like this.
Well, and I've got so excited for that scene, knowing it was coming, and, you know, shouting Shaka Khan at the end of the song with him. But then even the most wonderful line in the movie is him peering out from behind the curtain and saying that he's losing his mind. You know? And that is that was one of the lines that we used to quote all the time after watching this movie so frequently. The movie's so quotable. I mean, it's full of so many lines. But I think that's a common feature of Adam Sandler's films, is that he really develops these, you know, secondary and tertiary characters to have a little spark, something that makes them stand out. He's really good at that. Yeah.
And I don't know if he would argue that he's not trying to make a successful movie overall, but it's almost kind of goes back to Saturday Night Live roots of just like getting the funny in the moment, you know. It's like, I mean, they do all tie together, but you know, this movie, I think that's what makes it good as a movie as a whole. It's really enjoyable, and so it it doesn't just make the scenes themselves, you know, the only thing that you remember. So like, I can't really necessarily I enjoy watching Billy Madison. It's not a movie that I would ever say really kind of holds up to, like, you know, kind of movie standards. But, you know, this one does as a genre piece of a romantic comedy. I think there's so many lines, so many scenes, but I'm sure we have similar ones. But what are some that really stand out to you that you always enjoyed?
So I wrote down so many things. So the scene where he is sad and is performing at the wedding, when he's sad and upset, he really talks poorly about the people in the audience of the wedding. And at one point, there's a lady with sideburns, and he kind of jokes about her having sideburns, and that's one, and that's not actually a quote. It just it sort of goes on. But there's, am I allowed to swear on this? Are you going to bleep me out? Or
Oh, no, yeah, no.
Okay,
feel free to. Yeah.
Yeah. So when they go to Glenn and Julia's engagement party, and Glenn's best friend says, "Oh, I heard what happened to you. That was so cold. You must feel like shit." and Adam Sandler goes, "No, it felt great, man. My parents died when I was 10. Do you want to talk about that too?" That's one of my, because I've been in that situation before where somebody says something really hurtful and just like trying to connect with you, right? And you're like, what are you thinking?
Yeah.
And there's the scene where they're making Sammy drive the limo around through cones.
You hit 2 cones. Those could have been people. Those could have been guests at her wedding. They were cones.
They were cones. I laughed so hard at that delivery every time.
You know, that's funny that you say that, because basically me and my cousin that love this movie, we say that all the time to each other, and I never know if people pick up on that. So that's funny that you pick up on that scene too. But they were cones.
Were cones. And people that you tell about it who aren't watching it with you look at you like you're insane, that you think that's really funny. There's just something in his delivery of that line and the situation. Yeah, it's great. So there are so many quotes, and I didn't actually write them down because I assumed I would just remember them. There's also the line where he's teaching the elderly lady how to play piano or how to sing, and then she pays him in meatballs, and he says he takes a bite and goes, "That's a good meatball," with his mouth like full of meatball. And that always makes me laugh too. And then the last one I'll quote is when he's trying to get the job at the bank in the city, and he says, "Well, sir, I'm a fan of it." Like he's talking about money, and he says, "I like money. I'm a fan of it. I want to make more of it." That's where you come in. which is just so funny.
Yeah, so great. Yeah, no, I wrote very similar thing. I think the whole Love Stinks sequence is just amazing. I mean, just from the way he banters back and forth with the dad.
Oh my God, so funny.
It's so funny.
Hey, buddy, I'm not paying you to hear your thoughts on life. I'm paying you to sing. Well, I have a microphone, and you don't. So you will listen to every damn word I have to say!
But also when he performs "Somebody Kill Me Please," that song, it's just amazing. We do think it's a little funny. Like I can see how she kind of like actually sees the human side of him, like the vulnerability. And at this point, they're quote unquote friends, you know. But she's really kind of, you know, laughing it up. And you feel like, and if you were there, you would really be like, okay, this person does need serious help right now. But
that's an interesting point, because I also saw that she connected with him in that moment, and she said, "I liked it." You know, at the end when he's done singing, that's what she says. "I liked it," or "I loved it," which is really funny reaction to somebody breaking down in front of you.
Yeah.
But the line of I paid you to I didn't pay you to hear your thoughts on life. I paid you to sing, that the dad says to him, and that loves. I kind of wonder if that entire movie was built around that scene.
Oh.
It just feels like so pivotal to the whole film. That it seems like they had an idea, like what if you had a sad wedding singer and it turned into a brawl, you know. I wrote a lot of things down about that scene. It's a great one.
Movie Musings.
So Robbie Harden here, like I think maybe part of the reason I like this movie is I can relate to him, maybe not not the certain bouts of rage that he definitely expresses, but being the nice guy. I like, even at one point he's like, yeah, I'd kick her out of the house. Well, I'd make sure that she had a cab and I would pay, definitely kind of being the nice guy. But, a big part of his story is like, he's always wanting to get married and all that. So I was wondering, do you consider yourself a hopeless romantic?
I do not actually consider myself much of a romantic at all. I can appreciate the themes, but I'm definitely the guy that has to make a reminder to buy my wife flowers every now and then. I want to be that guy. I think, that culture's told us we should be that guy, but no, I'm not at all a hopeless romantic. And actually, the thing that's odd about him being romantic is that they clearly say that it's rooted in the trauma of his parents dying. That's like, he's wanted to get married ever since his parents died. Which I didn't remember as being such a blatant part of the film. But yes. Yeah. So I assume you are a hopeless romantic. Is that right, Nathan, given all your romantic comedy coverage?
Yeah, that's fair to say. I would say that, life, I don't want to say kind of chips away at that, but it does a little bit, where it's kind of like, I even joke with Whitney, like, yeah, like I've been working on basically archiving a lot of video stuff I've done, and that's a huge gambit of things, but a lot of those I just kind of laughed. I was like, I made her like a little slideshow, like, after our 6 months. I don't think it was quite 6 months, but like all these little things, and I'm just like, I'm sorry, Whitney, I just really have dropped the ball for the last 10 years or whatever like that. But yeah, no, we just celebrated like our 15th year anniversary. It's just one of those, like, you just, sometimes with life, you just kind of have an understanding of this is just kind of where we're at, and so we enjoy the moments when we can. But there's parts of, like, sometimes I'm like, oh, I gotta be better at that. But definitely I definitely had a picture in my mind. I was definitely kind of a guy like that wanted to get married. And I do think that there was that time kind of after college, and I was doing more kind of independent work. And so I think that contributed to it a little bit of just like, I wouldn't say I was like lonely, but just, I did feel like that was the thing to do. Now I think better now, not that that's a bad thing if people want to do that, but I'm definitely like, if you're in your early 20s, I'm kind of more of the like, hey, that's not, I mean, if that's your path you want to go to, great, but basically like, enjoy this time. If it's not happening right away, that that's okay, and so right. Yeah, and I think even though we have holidays like Valentine's Day and those such things, I do think there's a little bit more independence in those 20-something years than when we were 20-somethings. But that might have been just around, honestly, probably the church culture I was surrounded with at the time, where that was like the path that you had to take, as a male and that sort of thing. But yeah.
I think a lot of people's lives are sort of, the adolescent phase that we live in is sort of extending longer and longer, as people go to college, and then they go to grad school, and then they travel, they do gap years. Yeah, and I guess I should go back, since Michelle's probably going to listen to this podcast at some point, and say, when you asked me if I was a romantic, I didn't take that to mean, do you enjoy being married and having a family? The answer is definitely yes. I wouldn't trade that. I wouldn't trade it.
I think those are like, people might argue, they might argue and say that is one thing. I think those are like two separate things. Like, totally, yeah, for sure, yeah, no.
But I was never the guy who was gonna ride in on the white horse, at the wedding and with a cape and like kind of like this sort of performative thing. I think as we get, like, in a sense, rom-coms set us up for this expectation that that's what life is to be, right? But then the rom-com ends when the people get together,
right?
And that's the end of it. Yeah. Which, it's been nice in recent years to see movies that are a little bit more real about what marriages and relationships are like. It's been very nice to see that.
Oh yeah, for sure.
They're hard to watch, but yes.
They are. Yeah. There's definitely certain movies where I'm like, make sure you're in a good place in your relationship before you turn this on,
Right. Right.
What is one of your favorite 80s movies or songs?
One of my favorite 80s movies or songs. Boy, that is a tough question. So I really liked I've gone back and listened to a lot of punk rock from the 80s. So, Minor Threat in particular. So I love all of that stuff. The DC area punk that sprung up around that time. But then, just the typical like hits from the 80s, like You Spin Me Right Round, and all the movies from the Breakfast Club, or all the songs from the Breakfast Club soundtrack. These songs are like the ones that I remember growing up with. It's easier to say the music I don't like from the 80s, which is all of the hair metal music, which I think is not great. Personally, I don't love it.
Yeah. No, I totally get this. Just a little. I won't talk about this too long. One of my favorite 80s movie, for sure, Back to the Future always comes to mind for whatever reason. But I'm mentioning it because one of my friends posted on Facebook the other day that if Back to the Future was made today, they'd go back to 1994.
Oh my god!
I was like, I was just like, are you trying to ruin like everybody's day here? So anyway, so
Well, when I used to teach at OU, they would occasionally, when the folks would come in for the new year, they would send out an email that said, the year that these students incoming were born, this was like the stuff going on, the number one song, and it always broke my heart. It was always really hard to hear, but it's, it happens, right? We're getting older, and it's kind of fun to know that they're all creating their own culture. It's not just them absorbing our culture.
Yeah. So the third question I had for you is, and I want to preempt this with like, I was very honored to be I officiated your wedding, which was a great honor. And anyway, this came up actually not too long ago, and like we were joking about something like with somebody, like some friends or something, and she goes, "Well, Nathan can marry you," and I was like, "No, I'm not ordained." I just officiated the ceremony, and so anyway, we got a good laugh about that. She's like, "Oh, you're not?" I was like, "No. They had gone to the courthouse before."
Yes.
But my question was, what is one of your most memorable or embarrassing wedding experiences? So it doesn't necessarily have to be yours, but maybe like a wedding that you attended or.
Oh boy. So I would say the most sort of difficult one was some friends of mine in college were very poor, and we had the wedding and the reception in the backyard of a friend's house. And I recall distinctly a sheet of plywood being thrown on the ground for people to dance on. And not all of these folks were big city folks. They all came from different backgrounds, and at one point there was indeed a fist fight after everybody had a few drinks in the wedding, and that pretty much shut it down. So I would say that's probably the most memorable moment of any wedding I've been to.
Yeah, no, that is definitely a good one.
Rom-Com Rankings.
Okay, I just want to say, with this and the rankings and stuff like that, I'm pretty high on this movie. I was really trying to take it like at face value of like, I've seen this so many times. I enjoy it so much. It probably skewers my rankings a little bit, but I also want to say, I do think this movie is not like the perfect movie. I think there's certainly a lot of like crossfades between scenes where I can see that there's kind of some patchwork being done. But
Right.
as a rom-com, I think it's, as far as the genre goes, is like really up there for me. So, but we'll see if this is the same for you. So the first category, the romantic chemistry between the leads. So how would you describe the chemistry between Sandler and Barrymore in their roles as Robbie and Julia?
This one I thought about a lot, actually, because I expected this question to come up, and I think you have to distinguish between romantic chemistry and then people who just really like each other and enjoy spending time together. Because I don't know, I don't see Adam Sandler as a romantic anything, and in this movie, he's a really nice guy, and he's but I wouldn't have thought of him from that point of view based on what we see of him, right? I don't know. I would actually rate their romantic chemistry a little bit lower as opposed to just their chemistry as a whole.
Okay.
So maybe like a 3.5 on the romantic side.
Okay.
But I immediately wanted to say 5, right? But then I started thinking about it. I was like, well, no, they just really like each other and are really comfortable together.
Okay.
That's not necessarily romantic, right? He never does anything until the very last scene. I guess they kiss each other at that one point.
Yeah.
So maybe the kiss scene, I have to round it up to a 4. I forgot about that when I was talking.
So I listed it as a 5, especially I think seeing a lot of these movies. And I just think that they are just so cute together. There's that little scene where, what was the photographer maybe?
Yes.
Right. Yeah, but thinks that they're together and they play off being brother and sister and stuff like that. But I think there's a reason they did 2 more movies after this. I just think they just click in the way that they talk, and they do just seem to go together. So yeah.
And I would agree that in like 50 First Dates, I definitely bought their romantic chemistry in that, particularly his affection for her. Like I definitely bought it in that. I think this was when he was sort of transitioning to a more dramatic. And so when he's supposed to be in love, it's like he becomes almost a different person. Like he's very serious, and I don't know. Yeah, obviously I've thought about this way too much, probably.
Well, the second category is the best friends aspect. And so definitely, there's Sammy here, as Robbie's friend. Holly, played by Christina Taylor, is Drew Barrymore's friend. I kind of also saw this just kind of as sometimes like a supporting cast as a whole.
Yes.
And not to jump the gun on you, but I gave it a 5 because there's so memorable. But even down to the rapping grandma. I mean, I remember that was definitely like a thing. Even though that's not what I think is the funniest moment from this movie. I mean, I remember that like just seeing that everywhere after this movie came out. Like she was definitely like a thing for a while. But and I have to say, like Christine Taylor, who plays Holly, like I always had like a early on crush on her from the Hey Dude days. I rank this very high just because this is one of the aspects of the movie that we talked about the cones thing. I mean, so yeah. I don't know how you saw this category.
I think the best friends were really watchable and fun. Sammy was really wacky, and he has his moment of sort of truth where he comes out and says that he really doesn't want to, be a tomcat. He really wants to go around and, he wants to find a woman to hold him or whatever. I don't think Holly has the same moment of sort of honesty or whatever, which is a missed opportunity, I think. In every other way, there was so much symmetry between the best friends. But no, supporting cast, basically, they are supporting literally these 2 main actors. Like, you think of them as a community, basically. I have five hearts all along the way.
For sure. We kind of teased it a little bit, but the soundtrack. So, I know you definitely like certain types of music. So we've talked a little bit about the 80s aspect here. So the soundtrack was very popular when it came out. Is this a soundtrack that you enjoy?
Very much so. It was great listening to all the songs that I remembered from the time period. It was also fun listening to the cover of Video Killed the Radio Star by the President of the United States of America in the credits, which that cover, when I went and found it on like Napster or whatever at the time, kind of sent me off chasing that band for a while and listening to all of their albums. So I really did love the soundtrack. It's one of the best things about the movie.
Yeah, no, I agree. Kind of similar to watching the movie Forrest Gump when it came out, kind of inspired me to get the soundtrack and kind of learn about a lot of music. I think very similar. Like, I mean, if you turn the soundtrack on, it's just, if you love 80s music, I mean, this is it. I mean, it's just amazing with Hall and Oates, and that montage, is great. That features that song, You Spin Me Round, just all the great songs, including, I mean, if you do like Somebody Kill Me Please, it's on the soundtrack as well. But it was one of those kind of things that happened back then, in 98. The soundtrack was so popular, they came out with an additional one, like more songs from The Wedding Singer. So it was like such a popular seller for them that they came out with another one. So sometimes you would see movies that would do that occasionally. So this was definitely one of them. So
that's excellent. And I have to admit that when I was young, I was kind of a hipster about the song that he wrote for the end of the film when they have their big, moment on the airplane. And I didn't like it when I was younger. I thought it was too romantic or too whatever.
Oh, yeah.
But listening to it again, I thought this is actually a great song.
Yeah.
He is credited on the soundtrack with having written it. So it's pretty great.
Yeah, which I agree. I think it's a great song, which perfectly segues. It's almost like you set me up here into the fourth category, the chase scene or declaration of love. So, which this song "Growing Old with You" definitely plays into it. So, I would say we don't necessarily see a whole lot of them chasing each other in the airport, but kind of goes into that trope of the like airport chase and whatever. So, yeah, how do you rate this category?
It was so fun. I mean, I give it 5 hearts, and it was tropey, but they did a really nice twist on the part on the airplane where you think that they're going to go all the way to Vegas and try to find each other or whatever. But the twist that they're on the same airplane, I didn't see coming when I watched the movie the first time. I thought they did really well. Yeah. And then the Billy Idol, the whole everybody in the front of the plane falling in love with Robbie's story and helping him out, and I just, that whole part it's not quite up there with the Love Stinks scene, but it's a close second to that.
No, I totally agree. I think like even watching it as many times, it's just funny that it could have been really drawn out and they don't, as far as like,
absolutely.
And I think it's just so funny, they purposely do it, how they always cut to the shot. It's the same shot of the airplane in the air with a sound effect, and it has a little music cue, and just the fact that they keep using that to kind of mislead you or whatever like that. But yeah, just how it like ties into, the earlier conversation that Robbie and Julia have about, when he was trying to think about like what didn't work in his first relationship, and he's like, it's the little thing of like, I wanted to look out the window and she wouldn't switch seats with me. So how that plays with Julia and Glenn on the plane, and the drink cart. I mean, how can you, if you love this movie, can you not get on a plane and think of that scene when that cart just nails her elbow almost so hard that like I kind of wondered how they achieved that. It looked so realistic to me. I mean, I know sound effects play a lot into movies, but she had to kind of take one for the team on that shot. But I just and how it ties. I mean, they even say the words earlier, like I imagine somebody growing old with me or whatever, and so it's just it's completely memorable, and as I mentioned, wraps up really quickly. So I
love that. And I actually wondered what happened to Glenn after they shoved him in the bathroom, because it's like, you're right. They cut from that to their wedding. Right. And so Glenn never shows up again. I think one nice little touch would have been, Glenn in the back, like in a wheelchair or something, like looking surly or I like how they wrap it up so quickly. That was great.
Yeah. It's like, hey, we're getting out of here pretty fast, So,
Yeah.
rewatchability. I could probably guess what you
Oh,
give it.
yeah, five hearts. I mean, I haven't watched it in a decade until I watched it last night, but I would watch it again and just have it on in the background, and you can look up
Mhm.
at any scene and laugh. You don't even have to watch it straight through to get a lot out of it.
Oh yeah, no, I'm there with you. 5 hearts. So kind of a rarity for me. I want to say probably there's like one other movie like this that we've covered so far, but I gave all 5 categories 5 stars or 5 hearts, and so I mean that's this is definitely it resides on the list at number 9. And so it's definitely, I think it's definitely top 10 worthy for sure. And so, yeah, I mean, like I said, I mean, there's just the filmmaker in me. There's some things in here that, like, as far as a 5-star movie, I don't think I could quite give it that. But as far as what it's trying to achieve, it just does it like so well and uses all the tropes to work together really well together. But none of them are, I think, like overused. It's just a perfect mixture of everything together.
I absolutely agree, and I think Adam Sandler does a good job of using little gags and little jokes to kind of tweak things away from being too similar to anything else. I think he very he plays on a lot of those themes, so we feel connected, but then he adds in little twists and flourishes and things like Billy Idol being in the last scene where with the profession of love. That was really just made the scene, having him there talking and being part of it.
I mean, I think we both highly recommend this. If you haven't watched it in a while, take time and watch it. If you haven't seen it for whatever reason, throw it on. Especially if you're a fan of Adam Sandler, this is definitely one of his best ones. So I feel like I've already kept you for a lot of your time. So I wanted to thank you so much for taking the time to do this. It's I know we don't see each other a lot, but it's always so easy to talk to you when we do see each other. And so it's a little shocking to me that I'm like, I can't believe I haven't done this with Sean yet. But anyway, thank you so much for doing this.
Absolutely. And I would love to come back anytime. Love to talk about movies and watch movies and think a little bit more about them, in preparation as homework for talking about them. So
I don't know how much you like to be challenged. I mean, this movie probably doesn't make you have to dive too deep into into your brain to pull some stuff. I know you're a very scientific person, so this is pretty surface level. But
these friends of ours that are in town that we're hanging out with, we spent the entire morning talking about novels and movies and stuff that we read to get at a lot of those deeper themes. So a lot of chatter about AI and the future and stuff. So yeah, I do love the deep dives, but yes, for sure, this one wasn't a hard one to pick apart.
You're like, excuse me, I need to talk to my friend Nathan about The Wedding Singer.
That's exactly what happened. Sorry guys, I'll be back.
Hey, as long as they subscribe to the podcast, I'm fine with that. So
I will make sure. I will have them click that button.
Okay. Well, thanks again, and I hope you enjoy the rest of your day.
All right. Thanks, Nathan. It was fun.